So hello guys and welcome back to the channel. I'm here as part of my new farm tour series. However, I'm not at a farm today or a flower farm. I'm here with Eddie Bailey from Rhizophyllia, and Eddie got me started on my love of soil health and my soil health journey. So we've come full circle with coming here today to learn more about soil health with Eddie, and I'm hoping that he's going to teach you guys a thing or two as well. So thank you, Eddie, for having me here today.
Oh, well, it's an absolute joy having you back. Yeah, you were amongst my first brilliant students that came to the Rhizophyllia School of Gardening.
Yeah, and I remember I was raving about you on YouTube a few years ago when I first came here, because I was totally inspired by the things that you taught and the things that I learned whilst I was here.
That's lovely. That's very kind of you.
So could you just give us a little bit of information about what you do and how you got into it?
So I'm a geologist by profession. I work on farmlands looking for various minerals, anything you can make out of soil or rocks, then I get involved in that. So I've worked on hundreds of farms across the country in that line of work, and I'm an organic gardener and a soil microbiology specialist. And really I got into the soil microbiology because all the work I've done on farmland exposed me literally to a lot of chemicals. And when my family was born, I did what my mum and dad did when I was growing up. I set up an allotment, made sure the kids had plenty of truly organic produce. And I've just developed that love of the soil biology ever since. And 6 years ago, I decided that I needed to share some of that knowledge. You know, there's a lot going on in the regenerative farming world.
Yeah.
And that knowledge isn't being shared with gardeners and horticulturalists. So I thought,
Absolutely.
you know what? Let's set up the Rhizophyllia School of Gardening and see if I can help.
Perfect. And today we're going to kind of have a whistle-stop tour of soil health from the basics. So I wondered if you could kind of talk us through, why does soil health matter so much?
Well,
big question.
What is it about the soil that doesn't help a plant? Everything is all about the microorganisms in the soil. So these guys really know what they're doing. You know, we come along with our chemicals and think we know better, but no, we really need to understand who's in the soil and what they're doing. One of the key things that the soil microbiology is doing is creating a healthy soil structure. So in a soil, you have the particles of silt and clay, and those fine particles get drawn together by the bacterial glues into what we call microaggregates. And then the fungal hyphae draw those bundles of microaggregates into slightly bigger particles called macroaggregates. And as they pull things together, draw things together, they allow airspace between those particles. So now you have infiltration for water, and you have ease of gas exchange. You know, these guys down there are aerobic organisms, so that, like us, they take in oxygen, breathe out carbon dioxide, and they feed on various organic matters that we put into the soil. Now, that soil structure is created by the bacteria and fungi, and it sets the scene for nutrient acquisition, pretty much all the other health benefits that the soil's going to give you.
Yeah.
So we need to feed them. Now, how do those microorganisms get fed? Well, they get fed in two ways. So the plants, they send sugars down through the roots in liquids that we call exudates. They're various carbohydrates. They include things like vitamin C, amino acids. In fact, plants as a whole put into the ground over 100,000 different chemicals that feed the microorganisms, but also attract them.
Wow.
Okay, they want the bacteria and the fungi that are going to support them next to their roots.
Yeah.
So, and the second thing that feeds them is the organic matter that we put in as good, healthy compost.
Yeah.
What we tend to do as gardeners is we're told to, you know, conventionally put your rows of carrots in or your rows of parsnips in and leave a nice 9-inch or even 18-inch gap between your rows, and then make sure that you weed in between the rows. And I asked the question, well, who's feeding the microorganisms? If they're so important, who's feeding the microorganisms in between where the plants are? And on an average allotment, do you know 80% of that allotment can be bare soil?
Wow, I didn't know that.
Now, if you're putting mulch down and you think you're helping with water retention, well, you are. But these microbes need food, not just shelter.
Yeah.
So in between these rows of plants, unbeknown to you, throughout your season, you're depleting them of energy.
Right.
The sun is bringing down the energy, the plants are capturing that energy in this really clever thing called photosynthesis, putting all that energy, the light energy being converted into chemical energy, into those exudates. And that's about 50% of what the microbes need to feed on. But then they need the compost as well. So we want to be putting plants everywhere.
Yeah.
And in this particular bed, you'll see that I've sown a mix of dwarf annual wildflowers, and I've also planted in some cosmos.
Yeah.
And everywhere in between my rows of plants, there are sugars and vitamins and amino acids going into the ground. So, do you know what? If I plant my lettuces there next year, they're going to find the microorganisms that are then going to respond and feed them back. Interestingly, the plants, although they can provide a lot of the metabolites that they need to grow, 90% of the plant growth promoting hormones like auxin are manufactured by bacteria.
Wow.
90% of the stress relieving antioxidants are provided by the bacteria. 90% of the insect repellents are provided by the bacteria. Now, that makes sense because the plant wants to spend its energy photosynthesizing. And if there's no microbes in the ground, or the bacteria are depleted because you've dug your soil over, or you've put chemicals down, or it's stressed in some other way, then your plant is going to have to do all that work itself. Less room for photosynthesizing. Less photosynthesizing, less sugars. Go the other way, plenty of microorganisms in the ground, plant can photosynthesize, more sugars into the ground, more microbes, more antioxidants, more growth hormones, more leaf growth, and healthy leaf growth.
Yes.
So
I guess, the old school of thought would be that planting plants close to each other, they would steal nutrients from each other. So you're telling us that that's not true.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But actually having plants next to plants is very beneficial.
Yes, yeah, and the mycorrhizae between the plants, 90% of plants are mycorrhizal, and the mycorrhizae live in the soil.
Yep.
They don't live in composts.
Yep.
And yeah, those roots, the roots of that plant and those flowers, they're all connected. If you've got a good healthy soil with the mycorrhizae, they're talking to each other. So if a plant over here, let's say for instance, is short of a little bit of phosphorus, but a plant over here, maybe even this cosmos, happens to have an excess of phosphorus because it just happens to have found some in the soil, it will transport it through the mycorrhizal network to that plant. They're all helping each other.
Yeah.
That's how nature has set up. If they look after each other, they're not necessarily all best buddies, but they know that it's safety in numbers and safety in diversity. It's a lesson for humanity there.
Yes. So you're saying that planting living plants in the soil which have roots that are producing exudates is just as important as putting mulches down on the ground. You can't really have one without the other.
50% of what the microbes need, and it's them who are doing the work, or that we want to do the work, make gardening very easy. And 50% is being produced by the plant in the sugars. 50% is the residue that goes back on the ground. There's a deal in nature.
Yeah.
The organism, the human, the cow, that takes the forage, the seed heads, they take 40% of the energy of that plant.
Yeah.
The stalk, the residue, that would normally fall down, become decomposed and go back into the ground.
Right.
what we tend to do in a lot of gardening and farming situations is once we've taken like the seed off, we then take the residue off and take it off site, maybe burn it for energy. Well, that's food that should be going into the ground. So we wonder why our plants start to struggle. Well, it's because the microorganisms are struggling because they're not getting fed. So it's putting two and two together and seeing four. It's the microorganisms that are in control of it all.
Right, amazing. So many interesting facts and tidbits there for us to digest. And I think that kind of leads on quite nicely into compost production, and maybe you could give us some insights into how that can be done in a good way, in a soil health minded way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you've got
Should we wander down to the compost station?
Yeah, you've got a good compost station down there, so we'll have a look.
So here we are, Sarah, down at the compost station. This is where all the magic happens. Well, at least this side of the soil surface. The rest of the magic is happening below the surface up that end. But how do we contribute to the 50% of the microbes' diet through organic residues? So they need feeding on a regular basis. It really isn't sufficient to just put a layer of mulch down, say in October or November. They need a little bit of food throughout the growing season. So I feed them with my day-to-day compost heap. I just let that rise and fall, and I occasionally dig it out every 4 to 6 weeks to feed them. But every year I produce what we call a batch compost, where I mix together about that volume in a wire basket. I use wire baskets because nature decomposes things aerobically, and you don't get any better aerobic and even decomposition than a lovely round wire basket. That's over 98% airflow. But I make my batch composts simply out of 40 or 50% finely shredded wood chip, as many species as I can chuck in that as I possibly can. Really, diversity is everything. And meadow hay. I'm lucky enough to know a farmer who works on a meadow that has triple SI status, Site of Special Scientific Interest. There's over 200 species of wildflowers and hay in that, and again, diversity. So there must be over 250 species in all of that put together. I shred it and soak it to rehydrate it in these buckets, and then I allow it to decompose from March. I always do this before the end of March. I let it decompose for a whole year. That's also really, really important. For the first 3 months, the bacteria are working on the cellulose, and then after the 3 months, if the temperature comes down, the fungi start to work on the wood chip. And well, after a year, I end up with this beautiful material. Now this is actually sieved out at about 5 to 10 millimeters. Even with the best decomposition, you're going to get chunks of wood chip that are going to still look like chunks of wood chip. They'll obviously be a lot weaker. Well, I just sieve those out and they go into the next batch the following year. But once I've sieved it out, you have this lovely dark brown colour. You don't want black. Black is a sign of low oxygen, poor decomposition, but a dark brown colour. I always say that if you get a bar of dark chocolate, 80% dark chocolate, compare it to your compost, and if it's the same colour, you can eat your bar of chocolate. If it isn't, put the chocolate back in the cupboard. Yeah, it's got a lovely buttery texture to it, and that buttery texture is humic acid. And humic acid is the end point of decomposition. Humic acid is nature's version of biochar. Biochar has some wonderful electrical properties. It has negative and positive little electronic attachment points for all the nutrients that are in the soil, but it has nothing on nature's version, which is humic acid. Full of microorganisms, full of humic acid. That is what I will then use as a mulch well, in fact, I use this particular grading for sowing and potting, so that 12 months later, just as I start to pot up all my and sow all my seeds in the following April, this is then ready. And I think it's getting into that practice and that routine. It might take me a day to put this batch together, and then I can just forget about it for an entire year. Don't bother turning it, just let nature do what nature needs to do, sieve it out, and that's what I end up with. I wanted to bring you down here, Sarah, to explain to you what I'm doing in a permaculture sense, or centropic farming. There's other ways in which it's described. I like centropic farming. It sort of captures an image for me. And what we mean is a growing space that has different canopies, and you try and create your own climate with as much biodiversity as possible. So I've got my ash tree and an oak tree that I planted over there. I'm borrowing my neighbour's maple tree and a willow tree next door to me here. I've planted a sweet chestnut there. These are the higher canopies. I've got a lower canopy. I've got a mid canopy, which are my apple trees that I've planted. I don't know if you can see, but I've also got buddleia. And this is where I grow my blackcurrants. And my blackcurrants are in amongst the lower canopy still of, lovely yarrow here and knapweeds. And since I started growing my blackcurrants down here, I've just been inundated. It's been the most glorious thing I think I've done in this garden, where I've grown my blackcurrants traditionally on their own in a little island up in my allotment. They're always covered in aphids, not down here. This climate just seems to be full of biodiversity that looks after the health of the whole, and it's just quite an incredible experience. And what I learned from this, I've applied in my allotment space. You can now see my centropic farming. This is centropic farming on a miniature scale, and my ash tree during this incredibly intense hot weather momentarily for an hour or two was protecting an apple tree from the harsh sunshine, and as the sunshine came round, my apple tree got the photosynthesis it wanted, and then the sun was covered by the maple tree that my neighbours got. Well, these plants, if they were all of the same level, like lettuces for instance, they'd be getting hammered by that sun probably for about 8 hours. But my cosmos has this beautiful dappled shade, so as the sun comes round, the plants that are behind it are just having that little moment of respite. I've got my sunflower growing over there. I allow some of my lettuces to go to seed. I think they look glorious, and are fun, but again, they're having that shading effect. And really, I've got the higher canopies, the mid canopies, the lower canopies, and then my dwarf annuals. I like my meadow flowers. And the plants seem to really enjoy it. Here we are. This is the compost we've just been looking at, Sarah.
Yeah.
And straight in, we found a nematode. So we're looking at it at times 40 magnification.
Yeah.
And we're just going to zoom in a little bit, get a little bit closer to our friend there. These guys can eat thousands of bacteriums a day.
Am I right in thinking you can see the bacteria inside its body there?
Yeah, all translucent.
Yeah.
If it gives you the moment of, but they won't settle. They'll be like this for ages, and but that's a good sign. So very happy to see our nematode. And then we'll zoom in and we'll go searching for other less energetic creatures. Right, bye-bye nematode. So here we have that lovely, well, you'll know what that is, I'll be asking you now, you've been on the workshops. So a lovely fungal hyphae there. You can see the bacteria a decent amount of bacteria. You don't want to see too much bacteria. Too much bacteria suggests that you've overloaded your compost with cellulose, sugars, and a bit like kids with Mars bars is, you know, they'll reproduce really, really quickly, these bacteriums,
Yeah.
and basically suck all the oxygen out, and then you start to get into low oxygen conditions, which isn't ideal.
So you're looking for a good diversity
Absolutely.
under the microscope. That's
Absolutely.
kind of the happy medium.
Yeah, yeah. These dark golden brown aggregates, these are the macro aggregates. These are humic acids and fulvic acids. You get these little weird shapes quite regularly. That's just a mineral particle that's crystallized. You know, it's just like any ecosystem. You know, the top predators eat the next down the food chain, and they eat the next down the food chain. And when nutrients run out, then the turnover in the ecosystem changes as well. I call this the soil Serengeti. You know, and the bacteria are like the wildebeest and the zebra, millions and millions of them, and they get eaten by the next trophic level, which are the panthers and the leopards, and then those are the amoeba.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the lions and the crocodiles of the Serengeti, they're represented by the nematodes.
Okay.
So you've got this hierarchy, and if you've got imagine a big fence around the Serengeti, and to some extent in a compost basket, that's exactly what you have, a fence around it. Well, sooner or later, all the nematodes are going to have chewed through sufficiently enough of the protozoans, the amoebas, that they'll run out, and then the nematode population will drop.
Right. Yeah.
And so on and so on. So in an older compost, you do tend to find less of the protozoans, but there's plenty of fulvic acid, humic acid, quite a lot of fungal spores. Again, they've worked their way through the organic matter, and so they're running out of food. So what happens when the fungi run out of food? They put themselves into spore form. So I can put these into the soil where there is going to be that nice layer of mulch that I put in every 4 to 6 weeks, and those fungi spores are going to suddenly wake up and start chewing down that mulch that I've put in.
Yeah.
So that's what they're in the soil waiting for. But here we have an amoeba, testate amoeba, a big one there, full of bacteria.
So if we weren't producing enough compost to be able to cover our whole plots every 4 to 6 weeks, would a compost extract be sufficient enough, or is that just not enough?
Well, it would certainly help.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it probably in itself wouldn't be sufficient, but if that's all you are able to put in the soil, absolutely, because all of these humic and fulvic acids are carbon compounds, and they're in a form, unlike biochar, that is actually readily available. That's why the microbes, through their constant chewing and processing, make humic acid. It's like a saving scheme. You know, you have the sugars and the readily available cellulose in your compost, but they always put a little bit back in their saving schemes, and you can look at the humic acid and these aggregates as that longer term saving scheme. So if you have a summer like we've had, then the plants are perhaps not photosynthesizing as efficiently, because when the sun is as intense as it has been, then photosynthesis can get compromised. Well, then if there's less exudates going into the ground, less carbon sugars going into the ground, what are the microbes going to feed on? Well, this is their saving scheme, and this helps them through those occasional leaner moments.
It gets quite addictive, doesn't it? Just scrolling through slides like this and looking for something that's...
I could look at these for absolutely hours. What I'm also not noticing here are any problematic pathogens. I'm not noticing anything that would worry me as to the state of this particular compost. As I said, if there was, say, twice as many of these bacteriums vibrating here in the water, I might start to wonder why, what the oxygen levels are like, and why that might be the case.
So I mean, not everybody's got access to a microscope. I would say that probably most people don't. So what kind of signs can they look out for in compost that they've made themselves to know that it might be good quality?
So we talked about the lovely dark brown colour, yeah, at the end of a composting process. I mean, I would say if you've let it compost for a year, you almost can't go wrong. And recipe-wise, there's this sort of let's get the equal balance between browns and greens. Well, as an average rule of thumb, yeah, I think that works. But I would say critically, diversity. Chuck everything in the kitchen sink in and boost that microbial diversity. In terms of the preparation of the compost, it's no good putting one branch on top of another and leaving it all loose. It needs to be shredded and it needs to be mixed thoroughly.
Yeah.
So the microbe that sat on the wood chip particle with plenty of carbon is looking for a bit of nitrogen. Well, there's a piece of grass next to it. Oh, there's my nitrogen. It can now make another microbe.
Right.
If you've got a bacterium chewing some cellulose on the grass and it needs some more carbon, it's got some wood chip next to it. If you ask a gardener generally what decomposition is about, they might say, well, it's about putting nutrients in the ground, which, yeah, in a fashion, that's absolutely right. They might say, well, it's nature's way of getting rid of organic material, otherwise we'd be neck deep in it. But if you asked a microbe what decomposition is about, they would tell you it's about making more of me.
Yeah.
It's about making 2 bacteriums, 4 bacteriums, 8, 16, 32, 64, etc., etc. Because the more bacteriums you have and the greater the diversity, the more they're going to be able to produce for the plant all those fabulous metabolites that we talked about earlier.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense. So Eddie, one thing I've been doing whilst I've been on my travels is asking flower farmers and the different growers that I've been visiting if they've got a piece of advice that they want to impart upon the viewers. And I just wondered what piece of advice you had for the growers that are viewing this channel.
Well, for the flower growers and those that use bulbs, daffodils, camasias, scillas, those kind of things, what I would say is in my general composting mix I would go 50-50 wood chip and meadow hay, but different plant groups, like humans, prefer different foodstuffs, different combinations, and bulbs tend not to like woody composts. So any composts that have a lot of woody material, I would tend to maybe bring the ratio down to 30-70 rather than 50-50.
Right.
Yeah, so if you're growing bulbs, just go a little bit lighter on the wood chip element. Big up on the meadow haze.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me here today and for your wisdom.
It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been so lovely to have you back here. It really has.
Yeah, it's been amazing, and I'm reinvigorated with all of the soil health information that you've provided us with today. And I hope the viewers have got something out of it as well. I'm sure they will have done.
Brilliant.
So thank you so much, guys, for watching this video. And if you want to see some of my other farm tour videos, then they are on a dedicated playlist on my channel. And I'll put all of Eddie's information down in the description. Do you want to give yourself a little plug before we go for your workshops?
Well, if what we've been talking about inspires you, go on my website, rhizophyllia.co.uk. There are workshops, general gardening and growing workshops, where we bust quite a few myths. Composting workshop, that's one of the favourites. And then if you want to get really into who's in the ground and measuring, then it's the microscopy workshops. So yeah, plenty to go at.
Yep, so I'll put Eddie's stuff down in the description if you're interested. And if you fancy just being totally inspired, then definitely book onto one of Eddie's workshops. So thank you again, and I'll see you on the next video.